Next up in chapter 10 of the phase, we'll be talking about programming in the phase or a lucid dream as a way to influence your physiology. And so when I hear programming, I think of auto-suggestion, but he has a few other names for it as well, such as auto-training, self-programming, and self-hypnosis. All right, so these have been proven to bring results even when performed while awake. The deeper the trance state that they are implemented in, the more effective they are. From this perspective, the idea of using similar techniques to heal through the phase is, like even better, basically. Moreover, the unusual trance state in which self-hypnosis is performed does not even begin to compare with the phase in terms of substance and effectiveness. Since a person in the phase is in the deepest of all possible altered states of consciousness, this is the most effective place for such programming. All right, so how do you do it? There are several variations, or two he gives actually. First, one simply can firmly state one's resolution aloud regarding remedying a problem or regarding one's well-being. Second, programming can also be effected wordlessly at the same level of speechless understanding and intention. Some other things, he points out how it is important that the programming occurs in the subcortex at the deepest and most meaningful level. These words need to be experienced and felt at all levels of perception and conscious awareness. Then he has a quick recommendation in here on how to form your statements, where I've touched on this in previous videos too, but you don't want to say it in like the negative. And he has an example in here, like you wouldn't shout out to the dream, "I do not have insomnia." Instead, you'd flip that around and say something like, "I sleep deeply and soundly," or "I fall asleep quickly." And then we'll close it off with this. This technique works best of all for problems of personal psychology or general well-being. And he has some examples in here, such as improving overall work capacity, alleviate fatigue and anxiety, increase stamina, improve overall health, and bolster the immune system. So that could be a fun one to play around with. And next up, we'll be talking about psychological impact. Next up, we'll be talking about psychological impact. And I think the best way to describe this one would be with something like exposure therapy, where say if you were very scared of snakes or something, you get lucid in your dream or within the phase, and then you purposefully make yourself encounter a whole bunch of snakes until you essentially, get over it. And for like a lot of these sections, we're like kind of in like the middle of this here, but I don't really have too much to add. So for the most part, I'm just going to read straight up what he wrote. And so he writes, "Whenever it is necessary to solve problems related to psychological or psychosomatic illness, using the phase for psychological impact is the most effective, clear, and proven way to influence the organism. It would serve well to start by noting that practicing the phase, even outside the context of self-healing, in and of itself has a powerful, positive, and favorable effect that will manifest itself in any individual pursuing it. The point is that once someone has experienced the phase and realized the true expanse and endlessness of the world's horizons, he or she begins to relate to the world in a different way. He or she begins to relate to real life in a different way. He becomes more open, has fewer issues with himself and the world, and more sociable. Moreover, practical mastery of the phase builds inner centeredness, though this is a lot of work, and he points that out. Practicing the phase cannot but have a beneficial effect on the individual, as it is a real form of self-actualization in and of itself." And then we'll end it off with this. "As it is the psyche and the mind that are being impacted by these techniques for self-healing, a certain amount of internal effort is necessary to achieve results. For example, if a person is trying to overcome claustrophobia, then real fear will arise when he finds himself in enclosed spaces while in the phase. He will still have to confront his phobia on his own. The phase here only provides a springboard for working on oneself. It should never be assumed that the incredible effectiveness of this method comes out of thin air without effort on the part of the practitioner." And next up, we'll talk about a pretty interesting one, healing others. Next up, we'll be talking about helping others through the phase or your lucid dreams. And so he writes, "Only one of the wide variety of theoretical ways to have an influence on another person in the phase is proven and absolutely practicable. And it is techniques for, as you can probably guess, obtaining information." And if you've been following along on this series, and especially like the last several videos, you'll see that obtaining information just comes up constantly, right? And so it just really highlights how that is a fundamental skill that you really want to try and nurture and have in your phase or lucid dreaming practice. Anyway, he continues, "As of yet, no one has been able to prove remote influence on another person in a controlled experiment. it can be definitively stated here that either influencing another person remotely is impossible, or it simply remains unclear how to do it. It should be understood that even if there are some, techniques that allow some influence on others, the results are clearly far from stable. Scientific experiments have delivered no confirmation to date. All right, and so then how do you go do this whole obtaining information thing? Well, go look in my back playlist. I covered it in more detail several videos ago. Just look at the playlist, find something that says obtaining information in it, and that will probably be the video. But essentially, it's going to work the same way that you would get information for yourself, but instead of getting information for yourself, you're going to try to get it for, this friend of yours or this acquaintance that you are trying to help. And now something that does kind of go without saying, the more you know about this person who you're trying to help, the more likely it is you'll be able to get actually good information that can help them, right? You essentially are, like, the more you know about them, you're giving your subconscious mind just more information to work off of to try and give you a good solid answer. But anyway, he writes this. Using the technique for obtaining information, one finds a specialist who will help to deal with the problem that one's acquaintance is experiencing. One then speaks with this doctor about how to help him, about what can be done in reality, and so on. The phase doctor's prescriptions and or advice are then relayed to the person whom they were obtained. And he does point out this. There is another way, another proven way that you could help somebody else, through your phase or lucid dreaming practice. And that is, where are we? Of course, if one wishes to help another person, there is another proven way to do so besides obtaining information. Convincing him to practice the phase and employ the appropriate techniques for self-healing himself. From a pragmatic point of view on the phenomenon, this is a much surer way than trying to influence another person from the phase. And yeah, that's basically it. So I thought that was a pretty interesting chapter, or part of the chapter. Next up, we'll be talking about creative development.